Hello, and welcome back to Le Crime Noir right from the beginning. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I look forward to every single one. Note, the first 10 minutes may have 2-3 minimum ads, after which the story continues completely ad-free. If you enjoy haunting noir horror that touches the soul, please like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away, and let's begin. Story one first, I have to tell you about the trunk. It belonged to a middle-aged nobody, let's call them Lou, who owned a huge lake house deep in the woods. Braden told us about the place. He said it was packed with antique Chinese porcelain, vases, jade carvings, all kinds of expensive collectibles. He made it sound like a private museum, except the museum was owned by one person who never had guests. The heist was Jess's idea, not mine. I need that on the record, even if it doesn't make me any less guilty. None of what happened was what I wanted. None of what happened was what I planned for. I didn't go into this thinking anyone would die or that anything would follow me home. But the opportunity was there, and Jess knew how to talk people into stupid things. She knew how to make bad ideas sound like obvious ones. Braden helped too, whether he wants to admit it or not. Braden ran a small auction business. That's how he'd met Lou, and how he knew what was in the house. He said Lou was harmless, a hermit, bald, shy, short, nearsighted, and weirdly scared of technology. Braden joked that Lou was like Piglet from Winnie the Pooh, if Piglet was a human being who hoarded antiques. The most important detail, to Jess, was that Lou had no cameras, no smart doorbell, no motion sensors. Braden said Lou didn't trust tech and worried about surveillance. The only security was a simple alarm system, something old, something you could disarm from inside. Jess came up with the plan like she was sketching out a shopping trip. We knock, she said. Act friendly. Keep it simple. We get them to disarm the alarm to open the door for us. Once it's open, you tackle them. We zip-tie their hands, stuff them in a closet. Then we grab what Braden says is worth the most, and we leave. Lou might have recognized Braden, so Jess insisted she would be the one at the door. She'd do makeup, a wig, change her face enough that a nearsighted person wouldn't register her later. I remember thinking, this is insane, and also thinking, it really does sound easy. That's the sick truth. It sounded easy. And at first it was. It was too easy. Lou answered the door, squinting hard like they could barely make out our shapes. They didn't even fight. They just stood there, trembling, like a frightened animal that had already accepted it was about to be hurt. It still makes me feel sick to remember how little they resisted. Not because it's better if someone fights, because it meant they were completely helpless. I tackled them like I was supposed to. Jess slapped a bag over their head, and Lou made a small noise, not even a scream. More like a soft, stunned whimper. We zip-tied their hands. Then we ran into a problem we hadn't planned for. The closets were full. Every closet we opened was stuffed with supplies, winter gear, cleaning products, pantry storage, stacks of boxes. Lou didn't live like a normal person. Everything was packed tight, like they were preparing for a disaster that never ended. That's when I saw the trunk. It was big, antique, lacquered wood with ornate designs across the top and sides. The kind of thing that looks expensive even if you don't know anything about antiques. It sat in a corner of the living room between a sofa and a fancy cabinet. I pointed at it. Jess grinned like I'd just suggested the perfect solution. We dragged Lou toward it, shoved them in, and closed the lid. It had a lock. We locked it. It felt like a problem solved. Then Braden moved through the house like he owned the place. He didn't rummage. He didn't hesitate. He went straight to specific shelves and cabinets, silently pointing out what he wanted. He knew exactly what was valuable, and he knew exactly where it was. That part still bothers me more than it should. We packed up what we could. There was a Qing Dynasty vase Braden said could get $5,000. Ming Dynasty jade pieces worth way more. Carved boxes, ceramics, things I couldn't pronounce and didn't understand, but I understood money. That's what I hate about myself. Most I understood money more clearly than I understood what we were doing to a human being, locked in a trunk. When we left, Braden said one of us should call the cops and tip them off so Lou wouldn't be left inside. Jess immediately said it shouldn't be any of us. If the call got traced back, we'd be done. She pushed it onto me in a roundabout way. She suggested I get someone else to do it, someone not connected. So I talked my girlfriend at the time, Monique, into making the call. I told her I'd seen something shady, maybe a break-in, and I didn't want to call because I'd been creeping around the windows and it would make me look suspicious. Monique didn't love it. She hesitated. She asked questions, but I kept pushing, and I even promised I'd buy her something nice if she did it. Eventually, she agreed. After that, we went out for drinks and celebrated like we hadn't just done something horrible. Braden gave Jess and me an advance on our share, and we all pretended it was over. Done, clean, it all went off without a hitch. Until a little over a week later, when Braden called me. His voice sounded tight, like he was trying not to panic. Yo, he said, you called in that tip, right? What? Yeah, I answered automatically. There was a long pause. Then he said, I sent my delivery guy to the house. He said no one was home. Lou's not answering the phone either. Delivery? I repeated, confused. I told you about this, Braden snapped. I know Lou from auction. They bought something. I told them I'd make a delivery. I sent my guy. I was also going to see if Lou was acting suspicious, see if they were onto anything. My stomach sank, slow and heavy. You sure you called it in? He asked again, voice sharper now. Yes, I said. Then, because I needed it to be true, I added, Monique did. She said she did. Get here. Now, I drove to his office with sweat in my palms. On the way, I called Monique. She answered at work, sounding irritated that I'd interrupted her. I asked her, carefully at first, if she'd called in that tip last week like she promised. There was a small pause. Then she said, Oh, shoot, babe. My whole body went cold. What do you mean, shoot? I didn't want to make the call, she said, defensive now. You pressured me. It felt weird. I got anxious about it, and then I forgot. Okay? What's the big deal? I almost screamed into the phone. I started to say it the truth, how serious it was, but I swallowed it because I couldn't say anything that might incriminate me. Monique didn't know details. She only knew my fake story about seeing something shady. All she had to do was call the cops. That's all. If she'd done that, Lou would have been found. The trunk would have been opened. Lou would have lived. Whatever came after wouldn't have happened. I got to Braden's office, and the three of us, me, Braden, Jess ended up screaming at each other. Jess blamed me. Braden blamed me. I blamed Jess. Jess blamed Monique. It went in circles until Braden said, we have to go back to the house. Jess refused. She said no, absolutely not. She wasn't going back into those woods, not after 9 days. Braden said fine, he and I would go. He had a delivery excuse anyway. I tried to object, but he cut me off. No, he said. You messed this up. You're coming, so we drove back to the lake house, winding through the trees, and the closer we got, the more the reality settled into me. That place was isolated in a way that didn't feel real. Deep woods, no neighbors, no street noise, just water and trees and silence. If someone screamed inside that house, nobody would hear. If someone was trapped inside a trunk surrounded by porcelain and jade, nobody would know. I still clung to the idea that everything would be fixable, that we'd open it and Lou would be traumatized, but alive, that maybe the trunk wasn't airtight, that maybe they'd found some way to survive. I even had this stupid thought that Lou wouldn't recognize me if they saw me again, as if that mattered. What kind of idiot worries about being recognized when a person might be dead because of you? We reached the house. It looked exactly as it had. Big windows, deck overlooking the lake, calm water beyond. In daylight, it looked peaceful, like a vacation rental. But the front entrance, shaded by trees, felt wrong. The silence was too heavy. The air felt thick, like it didn't want us there. Braden and I stood at the door for a second without touching it, just breathing, like we both knew we were about to step into something we couldn't undo. The knob was locked. Of course it was. We'd locked it when we left. That had been 9 days ago. Braden told me to find another way in. I walked around the side of the house, checking windows, trying not to think about what might be waiting inside. To my surprise, one of the living room windows slid up easily, like it hadn't been fully latched, like someone had opened it before. I lifted it slowly and leaned in, peering into the dim interior. The living room looked the same, furniture in its precise spot, cabinets closed, nothing disturbed, except the trunk. It was still in the corner between the sofa and the ornate cabinet, but it had shifted, just slightly, like it had been nudged or pushed or knocked from inside. Everything in that room had been arranged with obsessive care, and the trunk sat there crooked, a few degrees off, like a picture frame hung wrong, like something had been banging against the walls of it until it moved. It was still locked. I pulled back from the window and looked at Braden. His face looked tight and drained. I knew my own face probably looked the same, because we both smelled it then. A stink so bad it was hard to describe. Not just rot, not just old garbage. Something thick and sour that made the back of my throat tighten. It drifted through the crack of the window like the house was breathing it out. I don't want to describe what we did next at the house. I can't. I don't even know how to explain it without sounding like I'm trying to protect myself. But I'll say this. It did not end with Lou being rescued. It did not end with us calling the police. It did not end with anything clean. We left that place without speaking. We didn't talk on the drive back. We didn't call Jess. We didn't call anyone. It was like all we wanted was to erase ourselves from the situation and pretend we'd never met, never planned anything, never touched that trunk. The antiques we stole never even got sold. They're still sitting in one of Braden's storage units. Nobody wants to touch them. Nobody wants to move them. It's like they're contaminated. For a while, I thought that would be the end of it. Guilt, silence, and a secret that would rot inside us until we died. But then, the trunk came back into our lives. Jess called me one evening and said, "It's in my..." I thought she was messing with me. I didn't want to hear another word about the trunk. I hung up. A few days later, I heard she'd overdosed. It was shocking in the immediate way. Death is always shocking, but Jess had always been reckless. When I let myself think about it, it wasn't impossible to believe. Then, Braden called. He sounded like he was trying not to hyperventilate. He asked if I knew how Jess died. I told him I'd heard it was an odd. Not just that, he said. Her body was found inside a trunk. I went quiet. She crawled into it. He continued, voice shaking, like she put herself in there, and then overdosed. I asked him if he was messing with me. I wanted it to be a sick joke, because at least a joke would make sense. "It's in my living room," Braden said. "The trunk?" I said, "That's not funny. I'm not joking." He snapped. "It's here. I'm looking at it right now." I went to his place, and there it was. The exact trunk. Same designs. Same scuff marks on the corners. Same hairline crack in one of the mother-of-pearl flowers on the lacquered surface. The kind of detail you can't fake unless you had the trunk. It sat in the middle of his living room like it belonged there. Braden told me he'd checked his Ring camera. Nothing, no movers, no person dragging a trunk inside at 3 a.m., no glitch, just normal footage. Then, when he woke up that morning, it was there. I asked if he'd opened it. He just stared at me. Dread settled in my gut, slow and thick. Fine, I said, because my fear turned into anger. Fine, let's open it. I flipped the latch and lifted the lid. The hinges groaned like they were old and dry, and when the lid opened there was this whoosh of stale air, like something had been holding its breath for a long time. I swear to God, it felt like the trunk exhaled. But inside there was nothing. No body, no bones, nothing you could point to and say, yes, that's the proof. That's the horror. Just a faint dark stain on the lining and a musty smell that seemed to cling to my clothes. We stood over it for a long time. Then Braden's nostrils flared and he said, "Did you do this?" "No," I said immediately. "No way," we argued. He accused. I denied. He said if he went down, I was going down too. I told him I didn't know what this was, but it wasn't me. He asked who else knew. Who else could bring it? Did I think a ghost did it? I told him maybe Jess set it up before she died. Maybe crawling into the trunk was her way of punishing us. Maybe she arranged for the trunk to be delivered to Braden after her death just to mess with him. I didn't really believe that explanation, but it was the only one that sounded remotely human. Braden didn't look convinced. Then, he said he was going to send the trunk to my place. I told him if he did, that I'd burn it. He stared at the trunk like it was listening. Actually, he said slowly, "That's a good idea. Help me." So I helped him. We dragged the trunk outside and smashed it apart with an axe, like we were trying to kill it. Wood splintered. Lacquer cracked. Decorative pieces snapped and scattered. We threw the pieces into his fire pit and lit them. The smell that rose up was so foul I gagged. It didn't smell like normal burning wood. It smelled like roasting meat, thick and greasy. The lacquer bubbled and oozed as it shriveled, and the whole thing looked wrong, like we were burning a body, not furniture. When it was finished, there was nothing left but ash and warped metal. I went home thinking, finally, we ended it. A few days later, one of Braden's coworkers called me asking if I'd seen him. Braden hadn't come into work. He wasn't answering calls. He wasn't responding to messages. Panic hit hard and fast. I called the police for a welfare check. I rambled on the phone, probably said too much, probably sounded guilty even if I wasn't confessing. I just wanted someone else involved, someone official, someone to cut through the nightmare. They found him, in the trunk, burned to a crisp. But the trunk itself had no burn marks, no charring, no soot, no sign it had ever been in a fire pit. It looked clean, intact, almost polished, like it had never been touched. That's the part that finally broke something in me. Because it meant burning it didn't destroy it. It just moved it, or reset it, or made it angry. And now, it's in my apartment. I don't know how it got here. I don't know when. I only know I woke up one morning and walked into my living room, and it was sitting there like a piece of expensive furniture I'd always owned. Same trunk, same crack in the mother of pearl flower, same scuffed corners. I stood there staring at it until my legs started to shake. My first instinct was to get it out of my life. I dragged it down to my basement storage unit and locked it inside like it was trash I wanted to forget. Then another thought hit me so hard I felt sick. What if I get stuck in there? What if it doesn't just show up in my home? What if it takes me? In my building, nobody would hear me scream from the basement storage. If I disappeared, people would assume I moved or relapsed or ran off. They wouldn't think trunk. So I hauled it back upstairs, sweating and shaking, and put it in the middle of my living room where I could see it at all times. I set up cameras aimed at it from different angles. I I attached a magnetized alarm to the lid, the kind that screams when a door opens. I made it impossible for it to move without me knowing. The first night, the alarm went off at 1 a.m. I shot upright in bed, heart pounding. I ran into the living room. I was standing over the trunk. My hands were on the lid. It was open. Not fully, but enough that the alarm had triggered, and the interior yawned up at me like a mouth. The smell coming from it was stronger than before, a damp, musty stink that made my eyes water. I backed away so fast I nearly fell. My phone rang security company, automated call. I had to tell them it was fine. I'd triggered it by accident. My voice sounded too calm, too rehearsed, like I was already practicing lying. Except it wasn't an accident. Apparently, I'd sleepwalked. I'd gotten out of bed, walked into my living room, and opened the trunk like I was answering a call. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in my bedroom with the lights on, staring at my door, listening for the alarm. After that, I escalated. I put a padlock on my bedroom door with a combination only I knew. I handcuffed myself to the bed and put the key in a bucket of ice on the far side of the room. I set an alarm on the bedroom door, too, so if I somehow got the lock open, the noise would wake me. It worked for a while. Most nights I woke as soon as my hand hit the freezing bucket, like the cold shocked me back into awareness. A few times I woke fumbling with the padlock, fingers moving with stubborn sleep logic. Once I was so exhausted I slept through everything until the sirens were already screaming, and I woke disoriented, half out of bed, hearing the alarm like it was part of a dream. Then yesterday, it almost got. I woke up in my living room. The trunk was in front of me. The lid was open. I was leaning forward like I was about to climb in. The only reason I snapped awake fully was because someone was pounding on my apartment door hard enough to rattle it. A neighbor was yelling, calling me names, asking if I was deaf. I didn't even hear the siren at first. That's how deep the trance was. The neighbor had been trying to get my attention over the alarm. I turned off the siren, answered the call from the security company, lied again, and then went straight to a hardware store like my life depended on it. I bought steel bars. I welded them into a cage around the trunk so the lid can't open more than a couple inches. The lock and the bars make it impossible for my body to climb inside, even if my brain wants to. But I don't trust it, because the trunk has started to smell worse. Not just musty now. It smells like rot and damp cloth, and something old that should not be sealed up. And sometimes it moves, not sliding across the floor. Not like a prank. It jerks. It thumps against the bars from the inside, hard enough to vibrate the metal, like something inside is throwing itself against the walls, like someone trapped. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I hear a muffled sound that might be wood creaking or might be a voice. I put my ear close once and immediately backed away because I thought I heard breathing. Slow, strained breathing, like lungs working in a tight space. I'm afraid to get rid of it, because I know it comes back. Jess couldn't get rid of it. Braden couldn't. Burning it didn't get rid of it. It only moved it to someone else. Sometimes I dream I'm inside it. I'm in the dark, pounding, screaming until my hands hurt, begging to be let out, but the sound can't leave. Nobody hears me. Nobody comes. In the dream, time doesn't pass right. It feels like hours and minutes at the same time. It feels like my mouth fills with stale air and my own. And when I wake up, I'm always afraid that one day I won't wake up in my bed. One day I'll wake up in the trunk. Or I won't wake up at all. So tell me what I do. Not in a vague, comforting way. Not in a turn yourself in way. I can't go to the police. I can't tell anyone the truth without destroying my life, and I don't think the truth would even help, because this isn't a normal situation anymore. The trunk is in my living room in a steel cage. It's getting louder. It's getting worse, and I can feel it, waiting for the moment I finally slip. Story 2, I grew up in a small expatriate compound in Saudi Arabia. The kind of place nobody would ever think about unless they'd lived in one. It wasn't a city. It wasn't even really a town. It was a fenced-off patch of desert built around work an oil station that processed and pumped crude from the eastern province fields up toward Lebanon, with rows of company houses and little strips of grass that stayed green only because someone was paid to keep them green. The compound doesn't exist anymore. It isn't on maps. I've looked. All that's left are faint outlines and satellite images where foundations used to be. Everything else is gone bulldozed, flattened, returned to sand. If you didn't know it had been there, you'd never guess people once lived and laughed and raised kids on that patch of land. About 15 families lived inside the compound, and maybe 50 bachelor's engineers, doctors, nurses, everyone knew everyone. If you got in trouble, half the adults knew before you got home. If you scraped your knee on the playground, 3 different moms had Band-Aids. It was the smallest version of a community you can imagine. A handful of square miles surrounded by desert, with a chain-link fence and a gate that made you feel safe until you realized how far away safe really was. I was around 10 when it happened. I remember waking up early, the way kids do. The house felt wrong in a way I couldn't explain, like the air was heavier. I walked into the living room and saw my parents standing by the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. My dad had one arm around my mom's shoulders, holding her close. They weren't talking. They were just staring. Outside was dark, but not night dark. It was more like the world had been covered, like the sun was there somewhere, but you couldn't reach it. The air looked thick, as if a sandstorm had rolled in and the haze had crept into the houses. Then I saw what was on the glass. Locusts, grasshoppers by the hundreds, crawling over the sliding door in a moving layer. In the yard, there were thousands. Beyond that, it felt like millions, a living storm that filled the air with buzzing, scraping noise. We'd had locusts before. It wasn't unheard of in that region, especially when storms pushed them across from Africa, over the Red Sea, through openings in the western cliffs. I'd seen them twice before, and I hated them. I hated the way you couldn't walk without crunching them under your shoes. I hated the way they flew up in clouds around you, smacking into your face and hair. I hated how you couldn't escape the sensation of being surrounded by something alive and stupid and endless. But these weren't the same locusts I remembered. Their color was wrong. They weren't bright green or dusty tan. They looked like ash, like soot, like something had burned and then learned how to crawl. They left faint streaks on the glass as they moved, like dirty fingers dragging through smoke. And the sound they made wasn't just buzzing. It was a rasping, dry, grating sound that made the inside of my ears itch, deep in that place you can't scratch with a finger. When my mom noticed me, she turned fast and hurried over like she wanted to block my view. "It's okay," she said, forcing calm into her voice. "It's just locusts." But every time I tried to look past her shoulder, she gently turned my face back toward her and said, "They'll be gone soon, okay?" I nodded because she wanted me to, but I couldn't stop staring at the glass over her shoulder. It was hard not to. The whole backyard was moving. And the thing that stuck in my brain, even at 10 years old, was that they didn't just look dirty. They looked like they were coming apart. I could see it in the way their bodies seemed too dry, too brittle, and the way some of them left little smudges of powder behind, like they weren't fully solid. For the next couple of days, I annoyed my parents with questions, because that's what kids do when they're scared. You ask questions like they're locks you can pick. When are they leaving? When they're full, my mom said. She tried to keep her voice steady, but I knew her. I could read her face the way you read a book you've read 100 times. She was scared, And if she was scared, then I was scared too. Where'd they come from? Sudan or Egypt, my dad said. He was sitting on the couch with one of his old Louis L'Amour westerns, the pages bent and soft from being read too many times. My dad was hard for me to understand. He didn't hate me. He wasn't cruel. But he also didn't know how to connect. When I thought about him back then, he felt like a book written in a language I couldn't speak. The TV wasn't working either. Something about the locusts messing with the shortwave antenna from the compound's little transmitting station. This was before home computers, before streaming, before you could distract yourself with endless videos. When the TV died, it meant you were stuck with silence or books. So fear slowly turned into boredom. I wandered into my room looking for comics, toys, anything that wasn't my parents' tense voices. My mom told me to stay away from the windows. I tried. I really did. But curiosity is stronger than fear for a kid, at least until fear wins. I turned my bedroom lights off like I was hiding from something and pulled the curtain back just a little. I wanted to study them. I wanted to understand what was wrong. The glass was coated in a thin film of ash, and the locusts carved paths through it as they crawled. Up close, I noticed something else that made my stomach roll. Their wings looked eaten, not torn, not damaged, eaten down to thin, cobweb-like scaffolding. I didn't even know how they could fly with wings like that, yet the yard outside was full of them moving in waves. And then I saw movement in the backyard. My whole body jolted like someone had grabbed my spine. At first, I couldn't make the figure out clearly through the haze, but it looked like one of the older Bedouin men who worked in camp maintenance. We all called him Old Hodge. That wasn't his real name. It was what the expat families called him. Like a nickname, like he was part of the place. He had a shema wrapped under his chin, and he was walking through the locust storm like it was nothing. Casual, calm, he was bending down, scooping up handfuls of locusts and stuffing them into a burlap sack. The Bedouin ate grasshoppers sometimes. I'd seen it. They'd roast them like a snack. Old Hodge had once offered me one over a little fire and laughed when I refused. I was too scared to try it. I remember watching him bite into one and thinking it looked too much like the way I ate chicken wings. I stopped eating wings for a while after that, so seeing him collect locusts wasn't shocking by itself. It was everything else that was. I watched him through the crack in my curtains, and then suddenly the locusts around him burst into flight like something had startled them. A wave of ash-colored bodies lifted off the lawn at once. I flinched backward, and when I looked again, Old Hodge was walking toward my window. He stopped just outside the glass, dust and ash swirling around him. He was close enough that I could see the locusts crawling on his sleeves. He looked down, right at me. Then he bent, ran his hand along the windowsill, scooped up a fistful of locusts and shoved them into his mouth. Not one, not a bite. A whole handful, jammed in like he couldn't wait. I screamed. I couldn't help it. It wasn't even a conscious choice. My body reacted before my brain could catch up. I ran out of my room and nearly collided with my parents in the hallway. I was trying to talk and cry at the same time, pointing and babbling like a kid who's seen something impossible. It took a minute to get them to understand enough to come look. By the time they pulled the curtains back, he was gone. After that, I wouldn't go back into my bedroom. I slept on the couch that night with the lights on. I didn't care if it made me look like a baby. I wasn't sleeping near a window again. The next day, my dad got a call from work. All hands on deck. They needed every doctor and nurse. People were coming in. Nobody told me why. I watched my dad pull on his coat and bundle up, then hurry outside to the Buick. The car windows were coated in insects. When he turned on the windshield wipers, the locusts didn't smear the way normal bugs do. They crumbled into ash and streaks of gray. It made my stomach sink. I watched him drive away into that thick, buzzing cloud until his taillights disappeared. We weren't close, but that didn't mean I didn't need him. Not long after he left, the telephone rang again. It startled both of us. We were already on edge, flinching at every sound. My mom answered, and she started speaking Arabic. I didn't understand most of it, but I could hear fear creeping into her voice. I thought it might be about my dad. By the time I stood up to go closer, she was already grabbing her coat and wrapping a scarf over her hair. "Mom?" I asked, my voice small. "Is Dad?" "Your father's fine." She said it too quickly, like she needed me to accept it without questions. Then she held my shoulders, tight enough that I knew she was serious. "Miriam is hurt. One of the mothers. She needs help." "What happened?" She hurt her ears. Even then, my mom didn't sound sure. "How?" "Honey, I don't know." Her voice sharpened at the edges. "I have to go help her and her kids. I want to come with you." She didn't yell, but her face said not to argue. My mom was the teacher in the compound. Everyone trusted her. All the kids loved her. She'd been my teacher since kindergarten. That meant I had to share her, even when I didn't want. She left me alone in the house. The moment the door shut, the sound of the locusts felt louder. It didn't just buzz. It scraped. It whirred in a way that crawled into my head, like a drill in my ear canal. I tried reading to distract myself. Tintin, Asterix, and Obelix. The pages shook in my hands. Every so often I'd think I heard something through the noise. A cry. A shout. A voice. I would freeze and listen hard, but then I'd hear nothing except that dry, hissing grind outside. Maybe kids were running around outside, I told myself. Maybe someone was playing some stupid game in the storm. But it was too late for that, and everyone had told us to stay inside. Eventually, I had to use the bathroom. I'd been holding it because I didn't want to walk down the hallway, but I couldn't hold it anymore. I opened the bathroom door, and the droning sound spiked so sharply it felt like a needle shoved into my brain. The pitch rose until my eyes watered. I jammed my fingers into my ears and hummed, but it did nothing. The sound didn't feel like it came through the air. It felt like it came from the walls. I lifted the toilet seat, and I screamed until my throat burned and my tongue tasted metallic, like I'd bitten down on a coin. The toilet bowl was filled with locusts, not a few crawling around, not some that had gotten trapped. Filled, packed like a living plug, their bodies pressed together in a pulsing mass that rose to the rim. Then they surged upward. They overflowed the bowl like water, except it wasn't water. It was insects, ash-colored, brittle, crawling and clicking and flying. They spilled out and slapped against my legs. I stumbled backward, slammed the bathroom door, and ran. But they were already coming up the sink drain. And then they came from the bathtub drain, too, bursting out in a sudden swarm as if the pipes were connected directly to a nest. I ran into the kitchen and saw them squeezing up through the sink like the plumbing had turned into a chute. And I was barefoot. That's what makes me angry even now. We lived in the... He wore slippers inside because scorpions got in sometimes. The red and yellow ones could kill a kid. But I'd been so used to the routine of the compound's safe houses, manicured lawns, adults nearby, that I'd forgotten how quickly safe could become not safe. I stomped on the locusts that jumped at me. I swatted and batted them away. They crumbled under my feet instead of exploding into powder like burned paper. The air filled with ash. It got into my eyes, my mouth, my nose. I was still screaming, even when my voice started to break. Then I heard glass shatter. I froze. The sound came from my parents' bedroom at the end of the hallway. I stared down that dark corridor. The locust noise rose in pitch, and I knew without even seeing it that the bugs had gotten in there too. A second later, the bedroom door swung wider, and hundreds of them poured out into the hall like something vomiting. I didn't understand how they were getting in until I heard glass breaking again, this time in the kitchen. A rock skidded across the tile floor, bouncing through broken glass. Someone had thrown it. Someone was breaking windows on purpose. Someone was letting them in. The house filled with flying locusts and ash. The curtains fluttered. The air looked dirty. Covering my ears, the sound seemed to sharpen the more I panicked. I couldn't think straight. I couldn't see clearly. Then I heard footsteps on broken glass coming from my parents' bedroom. Not insect noise. Real footsteps. Someone was inside my house. A figure stood in the bedroom doorway, just a darker shape against the darker room, staring down the hall at me. I didn't wait to see who it was. I ran out the front door, in my pajamas, barefoot, into the ash storm. I had no plan, no direction. I only knew I had to get away from the house, away from the windows and the drains and the footsteps. I only came back to myself later, when my body finally ran out of energy and I collapsed to my knees in the sand. My sides hurt from running. My legs were numb. My muscles had turned soft and shaky, like jelly. I squeezed my eyes shut and buried my mouth in the crook of my elbow to breathe. Locusts flew into me and disintegrated. Ash stuck to my lips. The air was gritty and thick, like breathing through a dirty cloth. They crawled on me too, over my arms, over my neck. They tried to get into my ears. They clung to my eyelashes. I shook my head hard, slapped at my own face, even hit myself by accident trying to get them off. They wouldn't stop. I could taste ash, bitter and dry. I kept trying to spit, but my mouth felt coated. I could feel tiny legs in my mouth at times, and I realized with horror that bugs had landed on my lips while I was breathing, and I'd bitten down on them by accident. They crumbled between my teeth, and I gagged and spit as hard as I could. Then the fear shifted into something else. The compound had clusters of buildings separated by stretches of hard desert. The fence meant I probably couldn't wander out into open wilderness, but that didn't matter much when I didn't know which direction led back to people. The desert around us wasn't empty. It just hid things well. Horned vipers, yellow scorpions, camel spiders that were big enough to make you scream even if they couldn't kill you. And there I was, barefoot, walking over sharp stones and dead scrub and insects. I started crying, full-on crying, not quiet tears, the kind of crying where you can't breathe right. Then I forced myself up and started walking again, head down, hoping I'd recognize something, a hill, a building, anything that would tell me where I was. Every step crunched locusts. Sometimes I stepped on sharp bits of their brittle bodies, and it stung. My feet started to ache, then burn. Pebbles dug into my skin. And through all of it, I kept hearing things. Voices, screams, whispers. It was hard to separate anything from the constant hiss around me, but I knew what a voice sounded like. Later, a therapist told me my brain was trying to find patterns in noise. Maybe, but I know when something is whispering to me. I know what it feels like to be spoken to. I called for my parents again, loud, desperate. That was when I saw someone moving toward me through the ash haze. At first, I felt relief. Then my stomach dropped. It was old Hodge. I'm sure of it. But he wasn't just walking through the locusts. They were on him. A layer of locusts crawled over his robes like living on. His headscarf looked crusted. His hands were dark with soot. His whole shape looked wrong, like he was wearing the swarm instead of clothing. He spoke, and the sound made my skin crawl. "Akul," he said. It didn't sound like one voice. It sounded layered, like a chorus of tiny dry throats speaking at once. Old Hodge opened his mouth, and I saw ash and insect legs inside. Still akul, he said again, reaching toward me. I knew enough Arabic to understand. Eat, akul, 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 over and over like he was begging me or commanding me or both. Then his hand grabbed my wrist. I screamed and yanked back, pulling so hard I thought my shoulder would pop. He held on. His fingers were cold and dry and gritty. Locusts crawled across my skin where he touched me. I twisted my wrist and clawed at his forearm with my other hand, trying to pry him off, and my fingers sank into him. Not like into fabric, into skin. His arm crumbled under my touch. It collapsed like dry clay. The hand gripping me didn't tighten. It simply fell apart. He kept moaning a cool like he didn't notice his left arm was gone. His foot went next. Then he dropped to one knee, then the other, his robes turning to dust, his skin cracking like charcoal. It was like all the moisture had been sucked out of him in seconds. He broke apart piece by piece right in front of me. Legs shattering, torso collapsing, a chunk of face landing in the sand. And in that broken pile, one piece of his face still had an eye. It blinked. The corner of a mouth moved like it was still trying to speak. Fingers twitched from inside the dust as if the body didn't know it was gone. I don't remember standing up. I only remember this numb shift where nothing felt real anymore. My feet stopped registering pain. The bugs stopped registering as anything except motion. I was detached from my own body, floating inside me. And then I stepped onto something hard. I looked down and realized there was asphalt under the ash. A road, a paved road cutting through the compound. It felt like a miracle. Roads meant buildings. Roads meant people. Roads meant the hospital where my dad worked, the community center, the mess hall, my friends' houses, anything but being alone in that storm. I started walking along the side of the road. Then, a booming sound shattered the constant locust hiss. A cannon shot. The sound rolled out and dropped off, and I recognized it instantly. It was the Ramadan cannon they fired when fasting ended and the night meal began. They usually fired it near the main gate, and near the main gate was the hospital. My dad. I started crying again, this time out of relief. And then the locust hiss rose sharply, like the swarm reacted to the cannon sound. Ahead of me, the locusts lifted into flight in a wave, not a random scatter. A wall, moving as one, racing toward me from the direction of the cannon. It looked like a living tide. I threw myself down onto my knees and elbows scraped on asphalt. Pain flashed. I curled around my head just as the wave hit. Locusts battered into me and disintegrated. Ash slammed into my back and neck and hair. I was swallowed by it, pinned under a storm of crumbling bodies. As I lay there, the cannon fired again. And again. And again. They found me later by the side of the main road, half buried under drifts of ash and insect dust. Almost catatonic. I don't remember being found. I don't remember being carried. I don't remember the first days after, when I apparently wouldn't eat or speak. I remember parts of the hospital later. I remember friends visiting, faces worried and gentle. I remember coughing for months, coughing up grit that felt like it would never leave my lungs. I remember feeling phantom crawling on my skin for so long that my parents cut my nails short because I scratched myself bloody in my sleep. Eventually, I learned what happened while I was missing. My mom and dad had raced back home when they realized I wasn't there, but the compound was falling apart in its own way. Some people couldn't take the droning and the whispering, and Miriam, the mother my mom went to help, had stabbed her own eardrums. Others broke windows on purpose, convinced the locusts needed to come inside, like letting them in would stop the sound. Several Bedouin men went missing, including old Hajj. My parents said it like it was just another tragedy, another unsolved thing. But I knew what happened to him. He was in the storm. He was in the... And sometimes, when my lungs still hurt years later, it felt like he was in me too. The next time the locusts came, they were normal, bright green, alive the way insects are supposed to be. But the compound still fired the Ramadan cannon a few times anyway, just to be safe, like sound could chase away whatever had happened before. We didn't talk about it much after that. Not directly. Only once, in a roundabout way, my father told me that Saudi Arabia had once been covered by a shallow sea, and that oil came from dead marine life pressed and broken down over time. The desert buries its secrets, he said, staring out the window like he could see something beyond the sand. And once in a while, it surrenders them, too. I didn't understand what he meant then. I think I do now. That locust storm was one secret the desert nearly buried me under. And deep down, I always knew it wouldn't be the last. Story 3 back in the mid-1800s, around 10 years before Canada officially became a country, strange things started happening in the land that would one day become modern Hillcaster. The area now called Crowfoot was mostly forest then, thick and cold and quiet, the kind of place where winter seemed to settle deep into the trees and never fully leave. Hunters who went into that part of the woods would sometimes find dead deer lying in the snow. At first, that did not sound unusual. Deer died in winter all the time. Hunger, cold, wolves, sickness, a bad fall, any of those things could kill an animal out there. But these deer were different. There was never any clear damage on the outside. No torn throat, no claw marks, no blood sprayed across the snow. They looked almost peaceful, like they had simply folded down and died where they stood. But when hunters tried to carry the bodies home, they always said the same thing. Something felt wrong. The deer felt too soft, too loose, like there was nothing solid left inside them. When they finally cut them open, they found the bones inside shattered into tiny pieces, almost like gravel packed beneath the skin. Near the places where the deer were found, people started noticing markings in the snow. They were always the same. 3 lines, one long line with 2 shorter lines spreading out from it. It looked like the print of a crow's foot, and that is how the area got its name. Crowfoot. Every winter, for 100 years, the dead deer came back. Every winter, the marks appeared in the snow. People were scared of it, but not scared enough to stop taking what the forest gave them. Food was hard to come by in those years, and Crowfoot provided meat without anyone having to hunt very far. That made it easy to ignore the question of why. People are good at ignoring a thing when it benefits them. They told themselves nature was strange. They told themselves the woods had their own ways. They took the deer, cut around the broken bones, and fed their families. Fear can be swallowed if it is mixed with survival. Things changed in 1965 when developers came to Hillcaster. They wanted to turn the forested area into a large city, something like nearby Adams, but built around timber. There were so many trees that they believed they could sell wood for hundreds of years. To them, Crowfoot was not a place with a history. It was not a place with marks in the snow and dead deer that felt empty inside. It was... The locals tried to stop them. They said cutting down the forest would destroy the area's natural beauty. They said it would hurt the wildlife. Those reasons were true, but they were not the real reason people were afraid. The real reason was that no one wanted to disturb whatever lived in Crowfoot. Their fear did not come from nowhere. To understand that, you have to go back to the early 1900s. In 1905, a family bought land in Crowfoot. They planned to build a cabin there, far from town, tucked deep in the woods where they thought they would have peace and privacy. They cleared trees in a wide area. The yard alone stretched about 50 yards. During the day, they worked on the cabin, cutting, hammering, dragging wood, and building a future for themselves. At night, they left and slept at a friend's house, until the cabin was finished. But every evening when they walked back from the building site, they felt something following them. They said they could hear footsteps about 150 yards behind them, always far enough that they could not see who or what made them, but close enough that they knew they were not alone. When they reached their friend's house and got safely inside, they sometimes heard noises in the front yard. Not wolves, not coyotes, not even bears. The sound was closer to the call of an elk, low and strange and wrong in the dark. A few months later, the family finished the cabin and moved in. After that, they stopped visiting the friends who had given them a place to sleep. At first, the friends were offended. They thought the family had used them and then disappeared once they no longer needed help. Eventually, they went to the cabin to confront them. But when they arrived, no one was there. The place looked abandoned. Rotten food sat on the counter. Dust had settled in corners. It seemed like no one had been inside for weeks. The family was never seen again. When the developers came in 1965, they did not care about any of that. If anything, the stories made them more determined. Out of spite, they started in Crowfoot itself. They went into the deepest part of the forest and began cutting down trees. As more and more trees fell, people noticed fewer crowfoot marks in the snow. At first, some thought that meant whatever had been happening was ending. But then, more dead deer appeared. These deer were worse. Their bones were not just broken inside their bodies anymore. Their limbs had been removed and shoved into their own mouths. Their bellies were split open, and all their organs were gone except the heart. The hearts were always left behind. The developers were horrified, but they kept going. Money is louder than fear, until fear gets close enough to breathe on your neck. One day, they went deeper into Crowfoot to collect whatever wood remained from the old family cabin built in 1905. None of them ever came out of those woods. That is the history people whisper about when they talk about Crowfoot. Now I need to tell you my story. I remember those days clearly, even though I wish I did not. It was 2015, and I was visiting my Nana and Papa at their cabin in Hillcaster. It was the middle of summer during a heat wave so bad that even with the air conditioning running, I was sweating inside. I was 11 years old enough to think I knew things, young enough to still believe adults had answers. That day, Nana and Papa took me down to the Spruce Creek Flea Market. It was the last day the market would be there, so they gave me $50 to spend on whatever I wanted. I do not remember everything I bought, but I do remember one thing clearly. It was a little panda made out of cereal boxes and rubber bands. If you pushed down on it, it jumped. I thought it was the coolest thing in the world for about 20 minutes. That same day, they told me a cousin from Alberta was coming to visit. I had never met him before. His name was Kyle, and as I later found out, he was an awesome dude. Before he arrived, I still had some time to kill, so I did what I always did when I was at Nana and Papa's place. I went for a walk in the forest. Normally, I loved those walks. The woods around their cabin felt endless, and when I was younger, that made them feel magical. I liked stepping between the trees and pretending I was going on some grand adventure. But that day, the woods felt different. They did not feel magical. They felt watchful. I remember walking along, trying to ignore the strange tightness in my chest. Every few steps, I felt like something was behind me. At first, I told myself it was just the heat making me uneasy. Then I finally turned around to head back to the cabin. That was when I saw it. A tall, lanky silhouette moved quickly out of sight behind the trees. Its arms and legs bent at angles that did not look human. Not broken exactly, but wrong, like its joints had been placed in the wrong spots. Sticks snapped under its feet. Branches cracked. Then I heard it start sprinting toward me. I turned and ran deeper into the woods. I did not think. I just ran. My lungs burned and branches slapped my arms and face. I had no idea where I was going. I only knew I had to get away from whatever was behind me. After what felt like forever, I saw the cabin through the trees. I ran until I reached the lawn, then collapsed onto the grass, gasping and shaking. When I looked back, I saw the figure moving back into the woods. It was silent now, as if it had never made a sound at all. A voice laughed behind me. "What the fuck are you doing?" I jumped up and turned. A boy about my age stood there, looking at me like I was the weirdest thing he had seen all day. "Oh shit," he said. "You're a hunter?" I stuttered out a weak answer. "Why, yeah, that's me. You're Kyle, right?" Kyle laughed. "Yeah, obviously." For the next few hours, we played together and talked about the random things 11-year-olds talk about when they are trying to become friends as quickly as possible. Games, school, gross jokes, dumb rumors, things we thought made us sound older than we were. I tried to act normal, but I could not stop thinking about the thing in the woods. It had moved too fast, too strangely. I kept glancing toward the trees. Eventually, I asked, "Hey, Kyle, do you believe in monsters and stuff?" Kyle stopped what he was doing. Kind of, I guess." "Why?" I sighed and told him what had happened. As I spoke, the color drained from his face. He stared at me for a moment, then looked away and forced a shrug. "Man, it was probably a deer or something," he said. "I'm going inside to grab a slice of pizza." We both went inside for food. I stayed longer than him because I was still hungry, and because part of me did not want to go back outside yet. When I finally finished eating, I went to look for Kyle. For several minutes, I could not find him. I called his name around the yard, walked near the trees, and started feeling that same tightness in my chest again. Then I saw him running out of the forest, sobbing. "Thank fucking God," he choked out. "I thought it fucking got you." "What got me?" I asked. "Kyle, what are you talking about?" He sat on a log, breathing hard. "Never mind, it doesn't matter. I got angry because I was scared." "For fuck's sake, Kyle, just tell me." He hit the log with his fist and glared at me. "Dude, fuck off. It's not important." After that, I went to the tent trailer where I was supposed to sleep that night, and Kyle went into the cabin. I did not fall asleep. He did not either. I know because we texted each other through the night about the elk sounds coming from the woods. Low, strange calls rolled through the trees again and again. We told ourselves it was probably an animal. We wanted it to be an animal. But elk do not live in Hillcaster. They never have. The next day, Kyle and I did not really play. We mostly kept to ourselves until around midday, when he met me on the lawn with a serious look on his face. "Hunter," he said. I looked up some stuff. About an hour's walk from here, there's an abandoned cabin. A ton of people went missing there. We need to check it out. I blinked at him. "Are you fucking insane?" He looked surprised, but before he could respond, I continued. "Because I sure as hell am. Let's fucking go." We spent about half an hour gathering supplies. Food, drinks, knives for protection, and a camera. It felt like a game at first, like we were two kids setting off to prove a legend wrong. The walk there was mostly normal. We talked about stupid things to keep ourselves from thinking too much. At one point, Kyle asked a question so ridiculous and awkward that we both started laughing. "Wait," he said, laughing hard. "So the G-spot is where—" "Yeah, it's up the—" I started, then stopped. A chill moved down my spine. The forest had suddenly gone quiet. No birds, no wind, nothing. Kyle grabbed my shoulder and pointed ahead. "Yo, dude, it's the cabin." I looked forward. Through the trees, in a clearing, stood the cabin. I reached into my bag for the camera, but my hand stopped before I pulled it out. Something felt wrong. The cabin was supposed to have been built in 1905, abandoned for over a century, but it looked perfect. The wood was clean, the windows were not broken, the grass in the yard was short and neat, like someone had mowed it recently. Kyle stared at it. So, why is the grass mowed? I did not answer. I reached into my bag, still staring at the cabin, and slowly pulled out the camera and 2 knives. I handed one knife and the camera to Kyle. My hands were shaking. We entered the cabin slowly. Kyle had already started recording, but his hands were shaking so badly the video must have been almost useless. The second we stepped inside, he whispered, "What the fuck?" The inside was destroyed. Rotten wood, broken windows, floorboards falling apart, moldy food, dust and decay everywhere. It looked exactly how a cabin abandoned for more than 100 years should look. Confused, we hurried back outside. The outside had changed. Now it was falling apart too. The windows were cracked, the wood was rotten, the grass was tall, dead, and tangled. I tried not to cry, but tears came anyway. "You're being a bitch right now, Hunter," Kyle said, though his voice shook badly. "Let's just go inside. Now." He was trying to hide how scared he was. He failed. I wanted to argue, but I knew it would be useless. We went back inside, both of us trembling. Every creak made us flinch. We moved past the kitchen as fast as possible, because the smell coming from it was horrible. Old food, rot, damp wood, and something else. Something meaty. Once we got past it, we saw stairs leading up. We looked at each other and somehow agreed, without speaking, that we would go up. Upstairs, we found a bench and sat down. Kyle was fidgeting with his fingers. He looked pale and close to tears. "You want to know what I saw yesterday?" he asked. At first, I did not understand the question. Then I nodded. I was too tired and scared to speak. Kyle closed his eyes and took a deep breath. "The thing I saw yesterday wasn't an animal. It was like 7 feet tall, and it had greenish skin." He started crying. "It had no face," he said. "Only a mouth," he breathed in again, shaky and uneven. "It had small dimples where its eyes should have been. One of its arms was growing out of its back." Out of its fucking back. Now I was crying too. That was the same shape I had seen in the woods. Kyle looked at me with red eyes, and it touched me. It touched me with that fucking back arm. I opened my mouth to answer, but then we both heard the front door open downstairs. Neither of us spoke. We looked around for somewhere to hide. There was a bed in the room, and we scrambled under it. The moment we were fully hidden, something began walking up the stairs. "Kyle, Hunter, get home right now." It was Nana's voice. But it was wrong. The words came out broken, like someone was trying to use her voice without knowing how it worked. Then the elk sounds came from the stairs. Screaming, gurgling, low, awful elk-like calls. Then it stopped. The thing went back down the stairs and closed the door. Kyle and I waited under the bed for what felt like half an hour. Maybe longer. Then we crawled out and ran. I do not remember the walk. I only know it was dark when we returned, even though we had left at noon and had not been gone long enough for night to fall. We tried to tell Nana and Papa what happened. We begged them to believe us. But can you blame them for not believing 2 terrified kids talking about a shape-shifting cabin and a monster using Nana's voice? They were more focused on why we had been gone so long. Nothing we said. That night, Kyle and I slept in the tent trailer. There were 2 beds, thankfully, but neither of us slept. The elk noises came again from the forest. We wanted them to be elk. We needed them to be elk. But elk do not live in Hillcaster. The next morning, we were exhausted. Kyle and I were supposed to leave at noon and go to Adams. I looked at my phone. It was 5:47 a.m. I sighed, though it came out more like a yawn. Kyle started to say something. then stopped. At first, I thought he had simply changed his mind. Then I heard his breathing cut off. Something tightened around his neck. A large, lanky hand. No, not a hand. Tendrils, several of them, wrapped around his throat. His face turned purple. I stared in frozen horror, then screamed. Nana and Papa came running out, but before they reached the trailer, the thing let him go. We tried to explain again, but they did not believe us until they looked at the back of the trailer and saw marks where something had hit it, again and again. They thought it was a bear. They knew, at least, that whatever had happened could have killed Kyle. After that, nothing else happened before we left. We drove to Adams at noon. I wore my headphones the whole way and eventually fell asleep. Kyle woke me when we arrived. Adams had once been considered a busy town in British Columbia, but after too many disappearances, people stopped moving there. Half the town was abandoned. The other half was either rough neighborhoods or wooded land full of people who wanted to be left alone. I lived in the wooded part. That did not mean it was better. It just meant there were more places to hide when someone robbed you. My family had one of the best houses in town, but that did not mean much. It was still only a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house that had not really been built to have 3 bedrooms. We were the richest people in the poorest town. Kyle and I said goodbye to Nana and Papa before going inside. My parents were not home very often, so we could do whatever we wanted for a while. We went to my room and sat on the bed. Neither of us had spoken since morning. The silence felt too heavy, so I grabbed a controller. "You want to play Minecraft?" I asked. "I've got a PS4. Kyle did not answer, but he took the controller. I loaded a new world. I do not remember much from the game. We just played for hours, trying to let blocks and pixels cover up what had happened. It was dark by the time we stopped. I stood and looked out the window. The woods outside were dark but thin. They got thicker about 10 kilometers away. But from my room, I could still see the lights from the less wooded side of town. "The woods are never this thin in Alberta," Kyle said, breaking a silence that had lasted about half an hour. I did not answer. He was right. Alberta had thicker woods than that. I wondered how big the woods in Crowfoot really were. They stretched for miles and miles. I would not have been surprised if they leaked into Alberta a little. Kyle's dad picked him up the next morning, and life continued, or something like life. I kept visiting Nana and Papa's place often until I was around 17. After that, I worked as many jobs as I could so I could save money and find an apartment as far from Adams as possible. I moved to Vancouver when I was 19, only a few weeks after my dad died. After that, I returned to Adams only twice, once when my sister got married and once when my papa passed away. I vowed never to return to Crowfoot, even though Nana wanted me to visit. I had seen the devil in those woods, but vows are not the same as promises. Not long after I turned 22, I received a text from an unknown number. "Hey, Hunter, it's Kyle. Nana only has a few months left, and I'm driving out to Crowfoot to spend a few more days with her. You can come if you want. Pills, come out, Hunter." That one message dragged me back to the place I had spent years escaping. The drive took about 4.5 hours. My girlfriend, Sarah, came with me because she wanted to meet my family. She did not know why I only really talked to Nana anymore. She did not know the full story. She sat beside me, excited and cheerful, looking out the window like we were going on a normal trip. "I can't wait to see your Nana," she said. "I wonder what kind of food we'll have. Deer, moose, elk," I cut her off. "Elk don't live in Hillcaster, Sarah. Elk have never lived in Hillcaster." My voice was flat. I did not want to go there, not in my mind and not in the car. Sarah grabbed my arm and shook it gently. You're no fun, Hunter, she said, giggling. I was glad at least one of us was happy. Then I looked at the gas tank. Almost empty. Hey, hun, I said, trying to sound normal. Can you check where the closest gas station is? She looked at her phone. There's one about 5 kilometers ahead in this small woods town. My hands tightened on the wheel. What's the name of the town? Some place called Adams, she said. Small town. I stared ahead and tried to stay calm. We'll find another gas station. She looked surprised, but she did not argue. It did not matter. The tank went empty right near the gas station anyway. God damn it, I muttered through clenched teeth. Sarah and I walked to the gas station. I told her, I'll find someone to help with the car. You get food and snacks. She nodded, put on her headphones, and headed inside. I went across the street to a tow truck service I knew too well from my teenage years. When I walked in, the old man behind the counter looked at me with confusion at first, then shock, then frustration. Where's the fucking car, Hunter? He asked. His voice sounded like how cigarettes smell. Hey, Roy, I said, trying to lighten the mood. Long time no see. Where's the motherfucking car? I could smell the cigarette he was smoking from the entrance. Like 400 yards from the gas station, I said. Roy stood and patted me on the back. Thanks for not getting stuck up on the highway again. He still was not smiling, and the pat felt more like a hit. He drove the tow truck to my car and pulled it into the gas station. I tried to pay him $100, but he pushed it away. You're living in fucking Vancouver, he said. Keep your money. I was about to leave when he called me back inside. He handed me a hat. You forgot this here the day you left for Vancouver, he said. Thought I'd return it. It was my dad's old hat, the one he gave me before he died. I thanked Roy and went into the convenience store. I grabbed a pack of cigarettes and a lighter, paid, and got back in the car. Sarah looked at me, disappointed. I thought you quit, she said. I did, I replied. I bought them just in case I need one. I buckled my seatbelt, turned on the music, and lit a cigarette before driving. And I sure as hell need one. Sarah took an edible and zoned out for the rest of the ride. It took another 2 hours to reach Hillcaster. We arrived at Nana's around 10:30 that night. Somehow, everyone was still awake. When I went inside and saw Nana, she almost cried. Then I cried, too, and we hugged for a long time. Oh, my God, she said. I didn't think you would come out. Her voice sounded exactly how it had in 2015. I felt like I had to, I said, trying to steady myself. I introduced Sarah to everyone quickly, then grabbed a beer. There were more people there than I expected. Aunts, uncles, relatives I barely remembered. No kids, though. I went outside onto the deck and looked at the stars while I drank. Kyle was in the pool with another person. Hey, Kyle, I said. My voice shook more than I wanted it to. He looked over and climbed out quickly. Yo, what's good, man? His voice told me he had started smoking young. Not much, I said. Life's been absolute shit, Kyle laughed. But there was nothing funny in it. Real, anyway. That's my boyfriend in the pool. You still single? His boyfriend waved from the water. No, I said. I've got a girlfriend. She's inside socializing. Sarah had always been social. Kyle and I talked for about 5 minutes before I went back inside. I chugged my beer and found Sarah. Hey, babe, I said, kissing her cheek. I'm going upstairs to crash. The bed upstairs was just as soft as when I was a kid. I lay there and looked at my arm. All my mistakes were marked on that arm. I thought, what went wrong? I had been 2 months clean, and now I was back in the place that ruined my life. The marks would never leave. I reached into my bag and grabbed melatonin gummies. I took 3. It was barely enough. I woke around 5 in the morning. Kyle was the only other person awake. I could see the living room from the bed. I got up slowly, groggy and heavy from the night before. Hey, Kyle, he waved. I sat beside him and noticed he had something in his hand. "What's that?" he sighed. "Weed." I nodded and looked at the ceiling. I went into the kitchen and poured myself some wine. "I'm going back to the cabin," Kyle said. His voice shook. I spilled some wine. "You're coming," he added. I looked at him in shock. "You expect me to go back to the fucking shape-shifting cabin? What's next? You invite me to a building with a sign that says evil-ass rape building? Like hell I am." I tried to laugh, but it came out like crying. "It's not like that," Kyle said. "We didn't die there. The worst part was the cabin changing. Now I was crying for real." "What about the elk noises, Kyle? Elk don't fucking live in Hillcaster. They never fucking have. Elk don't just choose to mimic voices in the middle of a place they've never been." Kyle stood and got in my face. "I don't want to go back any more than you do," he said. "But 3 people came with me. And now there's only me and my boyfriend. The others went for a walk in those woods and never came back." His breathing was heavy but controlled. "And I'm not dragging my boyfriend into this supernatural bullshit." His mouth trembled. His voice cracked. I felt torn apart, but I shook my head. "I don't fucking care, Kyle. I came here for Nana. After this visit, I'm leaving Crowfoot, Adams, and Hillcaster behind. That means I'm leaving you behind, too. I'm not going to the cabin." Kyle slapped me. "I fucking know," he said. "I know, Hunter. You think I wanted to come back here? I hate this place more than you because at least you were freed from it." He swallowed hard. "It followed me home. I finished the wine and poured more. I didn't escape it," he continued. "I escaped the creature, but I never escaped this place. This place follows me everywhere. I can't fall asleep without remembering hiding under that bed." He looked like he wanted to say more, but instead, he turned away. "I'm going alone, you fucking coward." That was the last thing he said before he entered the forest. He was in those woods for 3 days before I finally had the courage to start preparing to go after him. I wish I could say I went in as soon as I packed, but that would be a lie. It took another 24 hours before I stepped onto the path that led to the cabin. I dreaded every step. I wore headphones and drank a beer as I walked. I hoped I would never reach the cabin. I hoped I would find Kyle and the missing people lost in the woods instead. But Crowfoot never gives you what you hope for. The cabin appeared ahead. It looked perfect again. Clean wood, whole windows, mowed grass, just like the first time. I threw up when I saw it, tasting nothing but beer. Then I forced myself forward and opened the door. I did not look back outside. I knew what I would see. The outside would already be rotten now, just like the inside. It looked exactly the same as it had when I was a kid. The only difference was that 2 dead bodies lay at the bottom of the stairs. I did not recognize them, but I recognized Kyle. He stood at the top of the stairs, looking at something that was not me. I did not dare look. It had already seen me. "Hunter," a voice said. "What are you doing out this late?" It was my dad's voice. I started crying. Then the elk noises came back. I began mumbling louder and louder with each word. "Elk don't live in Hillcaster. Elk don't fucking live in Hillcaster." I closed my eyes. The thing walked right in front of me. Its breath smelled like blood and piss. Dry hands touched my face, scraping against my skin, but it did not hurt. It only touched me. Then it left. It walked out of the cabin. Kyle ran to me. Sobbing, he said things, but I did not really hear them. I walked home with him. That night, I packed my bags and left. I wish I could say the story ended there. I wish I could say everyone lived, the creature died, and Crowfoot was finally free. But it followed Kyle home again. Seeing his boyfriend sob at the funeral was the worst thing I had ever seen. The pain in his voice was worse than the feeling of that thing touching my face. My Nana died a week ago. That is why I am writing this now. I went back to Crowfoot for her funeral. Sarah came with me, so I would not feel alone. But I have not seen her in a full day. I think I have to go back. If I do not make another post, then you know what happened to me. And Kyle, if there's any part of you still somewhere in those woods, I am sorry. I am sorry I was not there more. I am sorry I did not go with you when you first asked. I am sorry I let you down. I am sorry I ever met you, because maybe if you had never met me, you would still be alive. Crowfoot takes what it wants and gives what it can in return. It smiles while you sob. It wants us. It will give more deer, but never elk. Elk do not live in Hillcaster. Story 4. I really did not plan to stay at the office that late. That is the part I keep telling people whenever I try to explain what happened, though most of them stop believing me before I even get to the elevator. It was not supposed to be one of those nights where I sat alone under half-dead fluorescent lights, drinking cold coffee and listening to the buildings settle around me. I had told myself I would leave by 9. Then 9 became 10. Then 10 became 11. By that point, I was too tired to think clearly, but I was also too close to finishing to give up. The office was on the 28th floor of a downtown building that looked much nicer from the outside than it felt on the inside after dark. During the day, it was just another corporate place, full of phones ringing, keyboards clicking, people talking too loudly near the coffee machine, and someone always asking if you had 2 minutes for something that took half an hour. At night, everything changed. The same open floor that felt crowded during the day became too wide and too quiet. The glass walls reflected empty desks. The windows showed only black sky and scattered city lights far below. The air conditioning never seemed to turn off, and the vents made soft whispering sounds that were easy to ignore when other people were around, but hard not to notice when you were alone. Around 11, the last person on my team packed up. Her name was Rachel, and she was one of those people who could shut her laptop at exactly the right time without guilt. I watched her put on her coat and wrap a scarf around her neck while I was still staring at the same spreadsheet I had been fighting with for hours. She came to my desk and leaned on the divider. "You coming down?" she asked. "I can wait." I looked at the file on my screen. There were still corrections to make, but most of the big work was done. Or at least, that was what I wanted to believe. "I only have one file left," I told her. "I'll be right behind you." That was not exactly true, but I believed it when I said it. I really thought I would finish in 15 minutes, maybe 20. I had been saying that to myself all evening. Rachel gave me a look that said she did not believe me, but she was too tired to argue. "Don't stay all night." "I won't," she waved and walked toward the elevators. A minute later, I heard the distant chime from the hallway, then the sound of the elevator doors opening and closing. After that, the office belonged to me. For a while, I worked in the soft glow of my monitors, surrounded by the low hum of computers and the occasional clicking sound from the heating pipes. The motion lights over the far desks switched off section by section because I was not moving enough for them to notice me. Soon, most of the office was dark, except for my desk and the copy area near finance. That area always stayed lit. I never knew why. Maybe because of the printer. Maybe because the sensors were broken. Maybe because the company did not care enough to fix it. The printers sat in that copy area, a huge old machine that everyone hated, but nobody replaced. It jammed constantly. It made grinding sounds like something inside was chewing bones. It printed slowly when you needed something fast and randomly spat out old jobs hours after people sent them. Everyone complained about it, but it had become part of the office, like the ugly carpet or the coffee machine that burned everything. A few minutes before midnight, while I was trying to find a missing number in the file, the printer warmed up by itself. The sound made me lift my head. At first, I did not think much of it. People printed things from home all the time. Someone would send a contract or a report late at night, then forget to pick it up until morning. The machine clicked, groaned, and pulled paper from the tray. The noise sounded much louder than usual in the empty office. One page came out. Then the printer stopped. I waited for more pages, but nothing followed, just one sheet resting in the output tray. I stared at it from my desk for a few seconds. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. I got up, stretched my back, and walked over. The copy area felt too bright after sitting in the dark for so long. The printer was still warm, its tiny screen glowing blue. The page had no header, no footer, no file name, no sender information. Just one line printed in the middle in plain black text. Don't take the elevator after 12. I laughed, not because it was actually funny, but because it was so stupid and unexpected that laughing felt easier than being nervous. It sounded like the kind of dumb prank someone from operations would pull if they were bored. They were always messing with people, putting fake error messages on monitors or changing someone's desktop wallpaper when they left their computer unlocked. I took a photo of the page with my phone and sent it to our team chat. Who's bored tonight? I waited for someone to respond. I expected at least a laughing emoji from Rachel or a not me from Mark, who always denied everything even when it was clearly nobody replied. That made sense, I told myself. It was nearly midnight. Most normal people were asleep or at home pretending not to check work messages. I crumpled the paper in my hand, and for some reason, I did not throw it away. I smoothed it out a little and left it beside my keyboard when I returned to my desk. I kept working. The file took longer than I thought. Of course, one number led to another. Then I found an old version attached in the wrong place. Then I had to check something against an email thread from 2 weeks earlier. My eyes burned. My back hurt. My coffee had gone cold, but I kept drinking it anyway because I was too tired to walk to the kitchen. The office got quieter and darker around. The windows beside the conference rooms reflected my own tired face whenever I glanced that way. When I finally sent the file, I leaned back and let out a long breath. It was done. Not perfect, probably, but done enough for morning. Then I checked the time. 12:21 a.m. That was when the printer started again. This time, I did not laugh. The sound came from the copy area, slow and heavy. The machine clicked like it was waking up from a deep sleep. Then it made a grinding noise that went on too long. I sat still at my desk, looking at the printer through the dim office. The bright copy area suddenly felt very far away. Another page started coming out. It printed slower than before, like the machine was struggling to push the paper through. The sheet slid out halfway, stopped, then jerked forward another inch. It stopped again. The printer hummed and clicked. Finally, the page pushed itself the rest of the way out and fell into the tray. I did not move right away. I told myself it was another. Someone had scheduled 2 print jobs. Maybe they were sitting at home, watching the team chat and waiting for me to freak out. Maybe the first message had been bait, and this was the follow-up. That explanation made sense. It had to make sense. Still, my legs felt weak when I stood up. I walked to the printer. The office carpet seemed to swallow the sound of my footsteps, so all I could hear was the buzz of the overhead light and the soft ticking of the printer cooling down. I picked up the page. Again, no header, no file name, no sender, one line in the middle. No matter what you hear, don't get off on 14. I stood there for a while, just holding the paper. The air seemed colder than before. The lights over the empty desks had gone off again, leaving most of the office in shade. The copy area was the only bright spot, and that made everything beyond it look even darker. I listened for something, though I did not know what I expected to hear. A laugh, someone hiding behind a cubicle, a phone buzzing with a message from a coworker saying they got me. There was nothing, just the quiet hum of the office. I checked the printer. No print history showed on the little display, but that was not unusual. The machine barely worked on good days. I checked my phone. Still no response in the team chat. I should have called someone. I should have gone back to my desk, turned on all the lights, and waited until a security guard came upstairs. But exhaustion makes people careless, and embarrassment makes them worse. I did not want to be the guy who panicked over a printer message. I did not want to call building security and say, a piece of paper told me not to take the elevator. So I folded the second page and put it in my coat pocket. I do not know why. Maybe I wanted to show everyone in the morning. Maybe I wanted proof that I was not imagining it. The first page was still beside my keyboard, crumpled, but I picked it up too and put it in my other pocket. Then I packed my bag, turned off my monitors, and left. The hallway outside our office was quiet. At night, the hallway always felt longer than it did during the day. The carpet was dark blue. The walls were pale gray, and the ceiling lights were spaced just far enough apart to leave soft shadows between. The elevator bank sat at the end, past the bathrooms and a row of locked office doors belonging to other departments. As I walked, I became very aware of the folded paper in my pocket. Don't take the elevator after 12. That was stupid, I thought. What was I supposed to do? Walk down 28 flights of stairs because of a joke? The stairwell doors locked from the inside on some floors anyway, and I had heard enough stories about people setting off alarms to avoid using them unless there was a fire. Still, when I reached the elevator bank, I stopped. One elevator was already there. The doors were open. It looked like it had been waiting for me. I stared into the empty car. The lights inside were bright. The metal walls reflected the hallway behind me in a warped, blurry way. Nothing looked wrong. It was just an elevator. I rode it every day. I almost turned back. Then I felt stupid for almost turning back. I stepped inside and pressed L for lobby. The doors closed. The elevator started down like normal. I watched the numbers on the display and tried to relax. The car made its usual low mechanical hum. There was a faint smell of metal and floor cleaner. My reflection looked pale in the polished door, but that was because I was tired. Nothing else. I even smiled a little at myself. I thought about how ridiculous I had been, standing in the hallway like some child afraid of a ghost story. In a few minutes, I would be in the lobby. Then I would walk to the parking garage, drive home, and sleep for 5 hours before pretending to function at work again. In the morning, everyone would laugh at the printer pages, and maybe we would finally get that awful machine replaced. Then the elevator dropped hard, only for half a second. But it was enough. My stomach lifted into my throat. The lights blinked once. Something above me clanged. The handrail rattled against the wall. Then the car stopped so suddenly that I had to grab the side to keep from falling. The display changed. The number glowed red above the door. I stood there staring at it. The elevator did not move. I pressed L again. Nothing happened. I pressed the close door button, even though the doors were already closed. Nothing. I pressed the open door button by accident, then hit close again. The panel lights stayed the same. 14, my mouth had gone dry. I told myself it was a mechanical problem. Elevators stop all the time. Maybe there was a service floor. Maybe the building had a hidden maintenance level that was technically the 14th floor, but not listed on the buttons. It was an old building. Old buildings had strange things. But then I remembered the paper. No matter what you hear, don't get off on 14. I looked at the elevator panel. The buttons went from 12 to 15. There was no 14 button. The elevator phone clicked. I had not pressed the emergency call button yet. The little speaker above the panel crackled with static. I took a step back, my shoulder hitting the wall. Then a voice came through. "It's all right," it said. "The doors will open. Please exit the car." The voice was calm, professional, almost friendly. For 1 second, relief washed over me so hard that I almost did exactly what it said. There was another human being on the line. Someone knew I was stuck. Someone was telling me what to do. The doors began to open. Outside was black, not dark like a hallway with the lights off. Black. I could not see the floor. I could not see the walls. I could not see the opposite elevator or any exit signs or any emergency lights. The bright light from inside the elevator reached the doorway and then simply stopped, as if the darkness outside had weight. It did not spill into the hall. It did not reveal anything. It just ended at the edge. I stood frozen. "Please exit the car," the voice said again. It still sounded calm, but now there was something underneath it. Something flat. Something wrong. I took one step forward. I wish I could say I was brave enough to stop on my own, but I was not. My body moved because the voice told me to move. Some part of me wanted to obey. Some part of me believed that if I just stepped out, everything would become normal. The hallway lights would flicker on. A security guard would be standing there. I would laugh and say, "The elevator scared me half to death." Then my hand brushed the folded paper in my coat pocket. That small touch broke something. I pulled it out without thinking. The page was crushed from my hand, damp with sweat, but I could still read the line. "Don't get off on 14. I looked back at the elevator panel. There was still no 14 button. My heart started pounding so hard that I could hear it in my ears. I stepped back and began hitting the closed door button over and over. The doors did not move. "Please exit the car," the voice said. I kept pressing. "Please exit the car now," the voice was changing. It was still trying to sound polite, but the words were coming faster. The calmness was thinning, like paint scraped off old wood. From somewhere beyond the open doors, inside that black space, I heard footsteps. Hard shoes on tile. Slow at first. One step. Then another. Then another. I could not see anything. The darkness stayed solid and empty. But the sound was clear. Someone was walking toward the elevator from somewhere inside it. I hit the closed door button harder. My thumb slipped and bent backward, sending a sharp pain through my hand, but I kept hitting it. The footsteps continued. Closer now. The voice from the phone said, "You have to leave." The footsteps sped up. Not running. Not yet. But faster than before. Each step had a little scrape after it, like one foot dragged slightly behind the other. "Close," I whispered. "Close, close, close." The doors stayed open. The footsteps were close enough now that I could hear something else with them. A faint wet sound. A soft drag. Then a breath, low and rough, coming from the dark. The voice said, "You have to leave." It no longer sounded like a person on an emergency line. It sounded closer, like it was coming from the darkness itself, like the speaker was only repeating what something outside wanted me to hear. I pressed the button with both hands. The doors finally started closing. Slowly. Too slowly. The footsteps became faster. For 1 second, right before the doors met, something moved at the edge of the black. I did not see a face. I did not see a body. Only the shape of a hand reaching through where the light ended. It was too long. Too thin. The fingers were stretched wide as if it was trying to catch the doors before they closed. Then the doors shut. The elevator dropped again. I fell to the floor. The lights flickered violently. The display above the door went blank, then flashed 14 again, then went dark. The car shook as it moved. I sat on the floor, pressed against the back wall, clutching the paper in one hand and my bag in the other. My breath came in short, ugly bursts. Then the emergency phone clicked. A different voice came through. Clear, rushed, human. Hello? This is security. Is someone in elevator 3? Hello? I tried to answer, but my voice did not work at first. Hello? The guard said again. Can you hear me? I'm here. I finally managed. I'm in the elevator. Are you hurt? I don't know. I'm stuck. The elevator stopped. What floor? I swallowed. 14. The line went quiet. Not static quiet. Person quiet. The kind of silence people make when they do not want to say what they are thinking. Then the guard said, very slowly, sir, this building doesn't have a 14th floor. I started crying then. Not loudly. Not in a dramatic way. Just a broken, breathless kind of crying that came out before I could stop it. The guard kept talking, telling me to stay calm, telling me maintenance was on the way, telling me not to press anything. I did not tell him about the voice. I did not tell him about the darkness. I did not tell him about the hand. I could barely speak at all. The elevator started moving again a few minutes later. Or maybe it was longer. Time felt wrong inside that car. The display stayed blank the whole way down. When the doors finally opened, and 2 security guards and a maintenance worker were standing there, I was still sitting on the floor. One of them asked if I could stand. I could, but I did not want to. They helped me out anyway. The lobby was bright and clean and normal. Too normal. The polished floor reflected the lights. The front desk security monitor showed empty hallways and parked elevators. Outside the glass doors, the city looked the way it always did after midnight. Quiet, but real. The security guard kept asking me questions. What happened? Did the elevator fall? Did I hear any alarms? Did the emergency phone connect right away? I answered as little as possible. I said it stopped. I said the doors opened on a dark floor. I said the phone told me to get out. The guard frowned when I said, that wasn't us, he said. I looked at him. What? The emergency call didn't connect until just before we spoke to you, he said. We got an alert that elevator 3 had stalled between floors. I called in. That's when you answered. I did not say anything. The maintenance worker looked uncomfortable. He said old systems sometimes glitched. He said audio lines could cross. He said maybe I heard a pre-recorded message from the elevator system. He said a lot of things that sounded like explanations but did not feel like answers. Before I left, I asked about the 14th floor. The guard looked at the maintenance worker, then back at me. There isn't one, he said. Some buildings skip it. Superstition, this one goes from 12 to 15. I saw 14 on the display. Must have been a display error. What's between 12 and 15 then? He did not answer right away. Mechanical space, he said finally. Not a public floor? Can someone get off there? No, he said too quickly. The doors don't open there. I wanted to ask more, but I could tell from his face that he was done talking. Or maybe he was afraid of saying too much. I went home and did not sleep. The next morning, I called in sick. Rachel messaged me around 10 asking if I had survived my one file. I almost told her everything. Instead, I typed, long night. I'll explain later. Then I checked the team chat. The photo I had sent of the first printer page was gone. Not deleted by me. Just gone. I scrolled back up. The message was missing completely, like I had never sent it. No one had replied because apparently there had been nothing to reply to. I checked my phone gallery. The photo was gone from there too. I searched deleted files. Nothing. That was when I remembered the papers. I had come home with them still in my coat pockets. I found the first one, the one that said not to take the elevator after 12. The ink had smeared badly, even though I did not remember getting it wet. Most of the words were unreadable now, but the second page was still in my hand from the night before. I must have carried it all the way home without realizing. It was damp from sweat, wrinkled and soft at the edges, but the last line was still readable. Don't get off on 14. I did not go back to the office for 3 days. When I finally returned, I took the stairs up from the lobby, even though it nearly killed me. 28 floors is a long climb, and by the time I reached our office, I was sweating through my shirt. Rachel laughed when she saw me and asked if I was training for something. I told her the elevators made me feel sick now. She looked like she wanted to ask more, but she did not. I went straight to the copy area. The printer was gone. A newer model sat in its place, smaller and quieter, with a bright touch screen. I asked Mark when they had replaced it. He shrugged. Over the weekend, I think. About time, right? I asked what happened to the old one. No idea. Probably junked. Later, when nobody was watching, I checked the print history on the new machine. Nothing useful, of course. I checked the copy area for any sign of the old printer, any paper left behind, any record of the jobs that had printed that night. There was nothing. For the rest of the day, I could not focus. Every time the elevator chimed in the hallway, my body went cold. Every time I passed the glass walls, I expected to see something standing behind me in the reflection. I left at 5 with everyone else and took the stairs down with a group of people so I would not be alone. A week later, Rachel stayed late. I told her not to. I tried to keep my voice casual, but she noticed. She smiled and said, "I'll be fine. I'm not scared of spreadsheets." At 11:58, she sent me a message. "Your printer ghost is back." Attached was a photo. It showed one page lying in the output tray of the new printer. One line in the middle. "Tell him he shouldn't have closed the doors." Story 5. Every detail of the day I lost my daughter has been playing over and over in my head since the moment I stepped onto the back porch and saw that she was gone. I have replayed it so many times that it no longer feels like a memory. It feels like a punishment. The heat of that summer afternoon, the sound of the swing set creaking, the smell of cut grass and warm dirt, the way sunlight fell across the backyard and stopped at the tree line, where our property ended and the woods began. I remember all of it with a level of detail that feels cruel, because I would give anything to forget even 1 second of what came after. We lived in a small town where almost nothing ever happened. There were a few stores, one diner, one school, one church everyone seemed to know about even if they did not attend it, and a government-run pharmaceutical plant on the edge of town. That plant was the only thing that made our town stand out. It sat past the last stretch of houses, right against the woods, behind high fences and warning signs. People in town talked about it sometimes, but mostly in that half-joking way people talk about things they do not really understand. Some said they made medicine there. Some said they tested chemicals. Some said it was not really a pharmaceutical plant at all. I never paid much attention to the rumors. It was just part of the town, like the water tower or the old hardware store. The woods around that plant in our neighborhood were huge. They stretched for miles and miles, thick enough that even people who had lived there their whole lives could get turned around inside them. Our house was right at the edge of those woods. The backyard ended under the shade of the first line of trees. Beyond that, there was only undergrowth, old trunks, animal trails, and darkness, even in the middle of the day. I had told Sarah many times not to go past the tree line without me. She knew that rule. She was a good kid. Curious, yes, and sometimes stubborn, but not reckless. Sarah was 9 years old when I lost her. Her mother had died the year before, and I will not pretend I was handling that well. Raising a 9-year-old girl alone is hard in ways people do not understand until they have to do it. There are the obvious things like school lunches, laundry, homework, scraped knees, and bedtime. But there are also the quiet moments when she misses her mother and looks at you like you are supposed to know how to fill that empty space. I did not know how. I was just trying. Sarah was my whole world. She was the reason I got out of bed. She was the reason the house still felt like a home instead of a place where grief lived with us. That afternoon, she was playing on the single swing set in the backyard. I had installed it myself, which meant it was probably not as strong as something a professional would have built, but I had done my best. She loved it anyway. She was pumping her legs hard, leaning back, trying to go higher and higher. "Look how high I'm getting," she shouted. She was so high that for one awful second, I thought she might clear the top bar. My heart jumped into my... "Be careful, sweetie," I called back. The swing set groaned. Then it gave a deep wooden creak that sounded wrong. I saw the side support shift just a little, and my body moved before my mind finished understanding what was happening. I rushed forward, but I was too late. The whole thing tipped. The seat swung sideways. Sarah fell into the dirt, and the frame crashed down beside her. I was beside her in seconds, expecting tears, screaming, fear. She had scraped her knee badly enough that dirt was already sticking to the blood. But she looked up at me with pain behind her smile and said, "Did you see how high I got?" For a second, I could not speak. That was Sarah, brave in the strangest moments, proud when she should have been crying. "Yeah," I said. "Yeah, I did. You got really high." I forced myself to smile, though my hands were shaking. "When I fix this thing, maybe try not going quite that high next time." I laughed and patted her head. She smiled back at me, trusting me completely. "Stay right there," I said. "I'm going to grab some bandages and antibiotic cream." "Okay," she said in that sweet little voice that still wakes me up at night. I walked up the wooden steps to the back porch, went inside, and turned into the bathroom. I opened the medicine cabinet and grabbed a few large bandages and a tube of antibiotic cream. I remember checking the label even though I had used it 100 times before. I remember the bathroom mirror, the towel hanging crooked, the sink needing to be wiped down, tiny, stupid details. I was gone for maybe 1 minute, maybe less. When I stepped back onto the porch, my eyes went to the spot where she had fallen. She was not there. "Sarah?" I called. No. At first, I thought she had moved a few feet away, maybe embarrassed, maybe trying to show me she was fine. I held my breath and walked down the steps. Each wooden footstep sounded too loud in my ears. "Hey, kiddo," I said, trying to sound calm. "This isn't funny. Come on out." The yard was still. The fallen swing set lay in the dirt. The trees moved gently in the summer breeze. No little girl, no laugh from behind the shed, no rustle from the side of the house. "Sarah." I yelled. My walk became a run. I circled the backyard, then ran to the side of the house, then back toward the woods. I screamed her name again and again until my throat hurt. I checked behind the porch, behind the trash cans, behind every bush, even though none of those places made sense. Then I called the police. I do not remember exactly what I said. I probably sounded almost incoherent. I only know I kept repeating that my daughter was missing, that she had been there 1 minute ago, that she could not have gone far. A search party formed that night. People from town came with flashlights, jackets, boots, and nervous faces. The sheriff brought dogs to try to catch her scent. Sheriff Perkins had known me for years. He was about 10 years older than me, with gray just starting to show in his hair, and he kept putting his hand on my shoulder like he thought touch could hold me together. "We'll find her, John," he kept saying. "We'll find her." I wanted to believe him. I needed to. But every minute that passed felt like someone tightening a rope around my chest. We split into groups and moved into the woods. The sheriff stayed with me in the center group, while a few deputies led search parties on either side, spaced out far enough that we could barely see their lights through the trees. Everyone called Sarah's name. Flashlights swept across trunks and leaves. Branches cracked under our boots. The forest seemed to swallow every sound we made. It was hard to believe a child could be somewhere in that darkness, alone and scared, and not answer. We must have been a mile or two in when I heard one of the dogs barking from the group on our left. The sound was faint, almost lost in the size of the woods, but I heard it. I did not think. I ran toward it. If that dog had found Sarah, I had to know. If it had found anything, I had to know. The barking stopped suddenly. Then I thought I heard a scream. I crashed through bushes and branches, ignoring the cuts on my arms. When I broke through a thick patch of brush, I saw the dog first. It was lying beside an old birch tree. Its front half was gone. The leash lay on the ground next to it, torn near the collar. My eyes followed the leash to the man who had been holding it, one of the deputies. What was left of him was barely enough to recognize as human. His head and most of his upper torso were missing, taken up to the chest in one terrible bite or tear. Blood soaked the dirt around the birch tree. It was splashed across the roots and pooled in the leaves. I stood there, unable to move or speak. A rustling came from my left, and I whipped around so fast I almost fell. The rest of that search group was coming through the trees. They froze when they saw the bodies. A woman in her 60s, Miss Erika, put a hand over her mouth. She was the first one to say anything. "What happened?" she whispered. Was it a bear? I had no words. I looked back at the deputy and the dog. The way the deputy's body ended, the rough shape of what was missing, made me think of the way Sarah used to eat peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, taking huge, uneven bites from the middle while leaving the crust. The thought was so horrible and so ridiculous that I hated myself for having it. They called off the search after that. I never accepted it. The official reason was safety. No one wanted to send more people into the woods at night after what had happened to the deputy. They said they would regroup. They said they would bring in state resources. They said a lot of things that sounded like action but felt like delay. All I heard was that my daughter was still out there, and everyone was leaving her behind. So I packed a rucksack and a tent. I filled it with cans of food, a water filter, a lighter, a first aid kit, rope, and whatever else I thought might help. I also took my old shotgun, a family heirloom that had belonged to my grandfather. I had not used it in years, but I cleaned it, loaded it, and told myself I was not coming back without answers. I left at 5 a.m. on a Tuesday. There was no special reason for the day or time. I just could not sit in that house anymore. I stepped into the backyard and stopped at the edge of the woods. The broken swing set was still lying where it had fallen. I looked back at the house one last time. "I'm not coming back until I have her," I said. Then I stepped through the trees. The woods were quiet that morning. Too quiet. I moved slowly at first, stepping over branches and pushing through undergrowth. The deeper I went, the more the town disappeared behind me. By noon, I reached a creek and sat down against an oak tree. My legs ached, but I did not plan to rest long. I opened a can of Spam, took a fork from my pack, and ate straight from the can. It tasted salty and wrong, but food was food. I had brought enough cans to last a month if I stretched them and foraged what I could. As I sat there, I watched the creek carry a twig downstream. My mind searched for possibilities. Maybe Sarah had followed the water. She was smart. She knew people used creeks to find direction. But that thought only led to another question. Why would she have gone into the woods at all? She was not the type to run away. Our house was far from the road, so it seemed unlikely someone had kidnapped her from the yard. unless someone had been living in the woods. But that seemed just as impossible. Then something thin and reddish-brown floated down the creek toward me. I almost missed it because I was lost in thought. I leaned forward and grabbed it, my fingers dipping into the cold water. It was tough woven cloth. When I lifted it, I realized it was a dog collar, the dead deputy's dog. I stared at it for a long time. The idea of a bear had never sat right. We had black bears in the area, but I had never heard of one doing anything like that to a man and a dog. There had been no mauling, no scratches, no signs of a struggle, just one or two clean, awful bites. I tried not to think it, but the thought had been inside me since I saw those bodies. Whatever killed that deputy could have killed Sarah too, or swallowed her, or carried her deeper into the woods. That was when I decided I would hunt it. Whatever it was, I would find it and cut it open if I had to. Only then could I know. The thought nearly broke me, but not knowing was worse. Even the worst truth would be better than the empty space my daughter had left behind. I followed the creek upstream. My boots sank into mud and slipped over wet stones. Any animal, if that word even applied, would need water eventually. The collar had come from somewhere ahead. That was the only clue I had, so I followed it. About a mile upstream, near a bend where the creek passed under a fallen tree, I tripped on a branch and fell hard. My hands hit the smooth stones of the creek bed, and cold water soaked through my shirt and pants. It ran into my boots, soaking my socks. I cursed and pushed myself up, wiping mud from my palms. In the summer heat, the water did not feel terrible, but I knew night would be different. Wet clothes in the dark woods could become dangerous fast. It was already getting late, so I decided to make camp. I stepped out of the creek into a small clearing, dropped my rucksack, and looked around for firewood. I moved past a maple tree and bent to pick up a thin, fallen branch covered in small twigs, perfect for kindling. That was when I noticed the shadow moving at my feet. I looked up. A swing hung from the maple tree. For a second, my mind refused to understand what I was seeing. The ropes were not ropes. They were dried deer intestines, twisted and stretched tight. The seat was made from a rib cage, probably deer bones, tied together in a shape that mocked the swing set in my back. It was huge, absurdly large, built for something far bigger than a child. It's mocking me, I thought. The swing moved gently back and forth. The setting sun caught the wet shine of the pinkish ropes. I held down the terror rising in my throat. By then, I was sure something had taken Sarah. The same thing that killed the deputy. The same thing that left that swing for me to find. Behind me, a stick cracked. I threw myself into a bush beside the maple tree. Branches scratched my arms and neck. A sharp point pressed into my skin, but I did not move. I peered through the leaves, one hand on the shotgun still slung over my shoulder. Two figures came over a small hill near the tree. They were men, not monsters. Both wore black military gear. Masks covered their faces. They carried AR-style rifles. The first one scanned the clearing. The second had my rucksack in one hand. No sign of the civilian, the first man said, but I'd say that's pretty clear evidence that she's nearby. He was looking at the swing. The second man corrected him. Don't humanize it. That'll only make things harder. I stayed frozen. My body ached from the way I was twisted inside the bush, but I did not dare move. The men walked down the slope toward the swing. As they passed close to where I was hiding, something else came into view. A hand. It rested on the ground just beside the bush, no more than a few feet from my face. It was massive, maybe 2 feet long and a foot wide. The fingernails were black, overgrown, thick and chipped. The skin was gray and torn, stretched tightly over muscle and bone. I held back a scream. The thing crawled forward. Its arms were long and wrong, covered in the same stretched gray skin. Then the top of its head appeared. It had long, matted black hair. The skin over its swollen skull was pulled so tight that it looked like it might split open. I closed my eyes and prayed it would pass without seeing me. Fond you, it sang. The voice was childlike, playful, wrong. My eyes squeezed shut harder as my whole body shook. There, one of the men started. His voice ended in a wet, cracking crunch. The other man began to beg. Lacey, listen to me. He cried. We're friends, right? Don't you want to go home? I don't want to, the thing said. You're all so mean to me there. But here I can play. I even have a friend now. Won't you play with me? Please, the man whimpered. Then he screamed. I heard him thrashing, heard something drag him through brush and dirt. The sound grew more distant, but it did not fade right away. I crawled out of the bush, raised the shotgun, and followed the screams. I moved fast over hills, around trees, and down steep drops. The man's screams were getting fainter, and I could not let them be. My pack was gone. My supplies were gone. There was no plan anymore. It was all or nothing. I found blood near a broken branch. The pointed end of the wood dripped red. Farther ahead, I tripped over something soft and heavy between two thin trees. I looked down and saw a severed arm, probably belonging to the man the creature was playing with. I pushed myself up and kept going. Ahead, in a small clearing, I saw it. The thing stood in the center, holding the man above the tall grass. It looked almost human in the way a nightmare looks almost like a dream. Its body was huge and twisted, its skin stretched and torn around swollen muscles and bones. It grabbed the man's remaining arm and ripped it off like a child pulling petals from a flower. The man screamed. Then it did the same to one of his legs. You aren't as fun as a dandelion, the thing said. But I can't reach the petals on those anymore without crushing the flower. Isn't that sad? Just kill me, the man begged through gritted teeth. In a minute, Lacey said. My friend is almost here. I took a deep breath and dropped into the tall grass. The sharp leaves cut at my forearms. I lost my sense of direction almost immediately, but the man's whimpering guided me. I was close, maybe 10 feet away, when my boot splashed in a small puddle. The creature went still. Hello? Lacey said. Sarah? It knew her name. Terror and rage filled me at the same time. It knew my daughter's name. I stood up with the shotgun ready, aimed at its deformed head, and pulled the trigger. The blast filled the clearing. The smell of gunpowder hit the air. Lacey shrieked and dropped the man, raising its hands to its face. I racked another round and fired at its throat. Blood sprayed out as it fell to its knees. I fired again, and again, and again. I fired until the tube was empty. The creature collapsed and did not move. I pulled a knife from my boot with shaking hands and cut into its belly. Inside, it was built much like a human, only wrong and stretched. The same parts were there, just distorted. When the knife opened it, a thick pus like fluid spilled out. I found the stomach and cut it open. It was empty. I fell backward onto the grass, exhausted and lost. Then I saw the military man lying nearby, barely alive. Rage came back hard. I crawled to him, grabbed him by the collar, and hit him in the face. Where's my daughter? I screamed. Where is she? My knuckles split against his teeth, but I did not stop. He looked terrified, but not. His eyes were fixed over my shoulder. Daddy? Said a familiar voice. It was Sarah's voice, but warped, stretched, distorted. A cold, long hand wrapped around my torso and lifted me into the air. It turned me around. I saw another monster, just like Lacey, but this one had brown hair and blue eyes. Sarah? I whispered. Hi, Daddy, it said. My mind screamed that this could not be her. Sarah was a 9-year-old girl, my little girl. Not this huge, twisted thing with torn skin and bulging eyes, but then the truth settled over me. Lacey had been a child, too, once, probably around Sarah's age before whatever happened had changed her, and I had killed her. "Daddy," Sarah said, her voice breaking, "I did something bad. I'm so sorry." "It's okay. I lied. You can tell me. I won't be." When I was waiting for you, Lacey saw me from the edge of the woods. I was scared, but she was around my age. She made me big and strong like her. She told me the only people I was allowed to hurt were the guys in black, because they're bad guys. But I was so hungry. She began to cry. "I ate Mr. Police Officer and his dog. I'm so sorry." "It's okay," I said, though nothing could ever be okay again. "It'll all be." She looked at Lacey's body. "Did they hurt her?" "Is she?" "Yes," I said quickly. I was answering the second question, but I hoped she would hear it as both. I could not tell her I had done it. I was a coward in that moment. All my brave talk, all my searching, all of it fell apart when my daughter looked at me. Sarah cried. Tears ran down the exposed muscle fibers in her. She wiped at her swollen eyes with one huge, twisted hand. She said, "Only kids can turn big and strong like this," Sarah said. "But my daddy is the strongest. I bet you can take it just fine." Her jaw unhinged. It opened and rolled back until her chin touched her chest. I could see straight down her throat into a black, wet tunnel. Something moved inside. Something white and thick slid across the red flesh. Then it sprang out. It looked like a grub the size of a small dog. Its round mouth was filled with tiny shark-like teeth. I thrashed, trying to break free. Sarah patted my head with her other hand like she was trying to comfort me. A tube pushed out of the grub's mouth. I screamed. The tube forced itself into my mouth and filled me with the same foul, pus-like liquid I had seen inside Lacey's body. I gagged. The taste was beyond words. Rotten, bitter, chemical, and alive. Sarah dropped me. I hit the ground on my knees and vomited. My whole body shook. My skin burned. But nothing else happened. "Oh no," Sarah said. "It's not working." She began to sob, covering her face with both hands. I looked over and saw the dead military man's pistol still holstered at his hip. I knew what had to be done. The thought was impossible. My body rejected it. My soul rejected it. But there was no saving her, not from this, not from what she had become, not from what the men at that plant had done. I took the pistol and stood on shaking legs. Sarah still had her eyes closed. I pressed the gun to her head. "It's okay," I whispered. "I love you, Sarah." Then I pulled the trigger. I do not know how long I sat beside my daughter's body after that. There is an emptiness that words cannot hold, and I was inside it. Eventually, I checked the military man's body. He had dog tags. He was real military, or close enough. My mind went to the government pharmaceutical plant on the edge of town. The fences, the warnings, the rumors everyone laughed about. I needed to write this down before I go. Since the day my daughter disappeared, I have had a rash spreading across my skin. The nausea is getting worse. Sometimes I feel heat under my muscles, like something is trying to wake up inside me but cannot. Maybe it did not work because I am not a child. Maybe it is just taking longer. I do not know. I only know where this started. I am taking my shotgun and going to that plant. I do not expect to get far. They will probably kill me before I make it inside. They will say a mentally ill father lost his mind after his daughter went missing and tried to break into a government facility. They will make it neat. They will bury the truth. But anyone reading this will know. Hug your children. Hold them close. Listen when they laugh. Answer when they call for you. You never know when it will be the last.